Hey everyone! Before we open today's file, please make sure to follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio, where you can find all the images that go along with today's case. You can drop us an email at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. You can find all of our socials in the Linktree bio on our Instagram profile, including links to merch. If you're feeling especially generous, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio, where you can get access to our exclusive Instagram page and make suggestions for upcoming episode topics that you would like us to cover. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to our Patreons, Riff Cult, Cropley Crab, Cash Broadus, Raspberry Jr., Jason R. Nelson, Creepy Paper, Jamie Sook, Michael Laughlin, Lindsay Keller, Mike Wright, Greer Weaver, Kelsey Carruthers, Linz Gibbon, Drake Holvig, Only Child, Michael M, Wesley Akers, Riaz K, Emily Medeiros, Pip, Heather Wynn, Graves, Devon Sweatshirt, The Ordained Sinister Minister, and Philip Hoffman.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Dystopian Simulation Radio. I'm your host, Chris.
And I'm Linz.
And we are going to be opening up a very interesting file today, Linz. But before we get into that, we do, of course, have to plug all the usual stuff that you heard a few moments ago anyway in the introduction. But shh. So don't forget that if you want to see the images, and you will want to see the images that go along with this, that you can go to our Instagram
at d.s.radio.
You can also support us by joining our Patreon.
Patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio.
And here's a real challenge, Linz. If they want to buy a t-shirt, they go to...
I'm going to make this up. Is it TeePublic?
Yeah.
TeePublic.com/stores/DS radio. No.
Ding, 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 ding,
really?
Ding. Yes.
Yes.
At least, I hope so.
I made it up.
They're all in the link in our Instagram bio. Anyway, so you can go over and check all the links over there, including various other links, like the link to Linz's book that you wrote if you want to buy one of those, never back in stock.
I forgot I wrote a book.
It's that good, folks.
Shut up. But how are you doing, Chris?
I am good. I am very good. It is. It's been very hot weather in England and the UK in general today. The weather doesn't stop at the border, I do believe. It's been good. It's been really warm today. It's been a bit cooler. It's raining at the moment. It's a nice a welcome break from the heat.
I think there was still heat and it was miserable because I went to see a Chris Killip exhibition in town and it was hot and rainy. So, yay, summer in England.
Yay. Just what you want.
Awful.
Linz.
Yes?
Do you remember what it was called when the Beatles swept America?
Beatlemania.
That's right. The phrase Beatlemania was coined, and people were obsessed with 4 young men from Liverpool in the UK. But a little known fact is that this phenomenon was only the second largest mania ever recorded. Any ideas what might have been larger, Linz?
Hulkamania.
Today, Linz, we are talking about the trials and tribulations, the rise and fall of Hulkamania.
Oh
my gosh, I can't believe I actually got something right on this podcast. Oh my gosh, I'm so fucking excited, sorry.
Well, make sure you take your vitamins, say your prayers, tuck into a big bowl of pasta mania, and get on my back, Jack, as we rip off our t-shirts dramatically to the background of the American flag, dude, and drop the big leg on the story of one Hulk Hogan brother.
Yes.
Now, you may be thinking, DS Radio, why are you covering Hulk Hogan? Well, we not only cover alien abductions and Loch Ness here on this show, but also some incredible stories and sometimes unbelievable stories. And the story of Hulk Hogan is one of unbelievable proportions that will take some insane legal turns along the way. Now, I must say, this is in no way a character assassination. I'm a Hulkamaniac dude, but I'm also going to call out some things along the way that are not quite kosher.
I have heard that Hulk went through a bit of a phase.
He did. He went through a phase. Several of them. But anyway, the first thing that we need to establish is that Hulk is creative with the truth.
Created with the truth?
Yeah, like when he claimed in an interview that he slammed a 600-pound Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, tore 18 muscles in his back doing it, had to fly to Japan the next day and wrestle 29 straight shows, and on top of it all, that Andre died mere days after being slammed. The impressive thing is that there's so many lies packed into that one statement that it's actually fantastic value for money. So, Hulk did slam Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3 in 1987, but there's no record of any injury to the Hulkster. He didn't wrestle one date, let alone 29 dates in Japan following that. And also, Andre the Giant died in 1993, 6 years after WrestleMania 3.
It was one of those injuries, like in martial arts where you stamp somebody in a very specific area of the foot and then in exactly 7 years they die. Maybe it was one of those moves.
It has to work its way up through you very slowly.
Yeah.
Well, Hulk's relationship with the truth will be a recurring theme, but I've done my best to verify fact from fiction, and it's pretty easy to be honest because he's not a very good liar.
I have heard that.
But let's start at the beginning, dude. And Linz, any idea what Hulk Hogan's real name is?
Oh my gosh. No, but I'm going to take a guess. What year was he born? This might help.
1953.
53. Okay. A man born in 1953 in the US, I assume. What would he be called?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go. I love the fact that I have no clue. I kind of want to go with Arnold or like Richard.
Okay. Well, neither of those. Hulk Hogan was born Terry Jean Bollea.
I think I did know he was called Terry. Damn it. What a name.
Well, Terry Jean Bollea was born in 1953 in Augusta, Georgia. And as he grew up, he loved 3 things: playing bass, working out, and playing Little League Baseball.
Is it me? I'm kidding.
You are known for your Little League Baseball record.
Yep, pro.
Now, Hogan claims that he was asked to play in Metallica as the bass player, but turned it down. And I must also state that the band also denies ever knowing him.
Oh, no. Was this like back in the very, very early days when they're playing like dive bars and none of them could remember one night to the next?
I guess so. He also claims that he batted an unheard of .714. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds impressive. In the Little League World Series, following which he was scouted by both the New York Yankees and the Cincinnati Reds.
Okay.
The Little League has no record of a young Terry Bollea ever competing And neither of the teams have ever been able to verify that he was actually scouted.
Why does he have to lie about these things?
I think we'll get into that as we go through. I think he's
Okay,
probably
right.
down in his core quite insecure.
I thought you were going to say quite insane.
Well, that as well. But the one thing that we can't doubt of his passions when he was younger is that he knew how to work out. And he was inspired by the impressive physique of the wrestler superstar Billy Graham and began lifting weights, trying to emulate his figure. Eventually, he lifted so many weights that he actually surpassed the larger-than-life Billy Graham and was spotted out and about by the wrestlers Jack and Jerry Briscoe, who happened to see his live band, Ruckus, play in a bar.
Of course it's called a ruckus.
Linz, I'm going to send you a picture of Ruckus now, and
thank God.
I'd like to see if you can spot a young Hulk Hogan.
Oh, is this going to be difficult?
You tell me.
Oh, this was not what I was expecting. So we have a kind of... Oh, there he is with his bandana and his blonde long hair and his glasses in the middle. And no t-shirt, looking very bronze. Yep, right off you can see him there. But this is not what I expected. Ruckus they've got a 70s style. Not massively glam, but we've got the fuzzy hair, long bell bottoms, platforms, no shirts, just open shirts and bare chests.
There's a lot of chest hair on display.
There's a lot of
chest hair. Except for that guy on the left.
Yeah.
Who is smooth as a baby's bum.
But he's left a sort of, what do you call it? Treasure trail down the middle there.
Oh, a happy trail, yes.
But yeah, Hulk Hogan has always looked like Hulk Hogan, hasn't he?
He was born for this job.
Yep.
Now, recognizing the slab of grade A beef that a young Terry Bollea was, the Briscoe brothers encouraged him to train as a wrestler with somebody they knew called Hiro Matsuda. Hiro Matsuda was a Japanese wrestler living in the US who had trained several future superstars. And he himself was mentored by a name that you'll know, Ricky Dozan.
Oh, Ricky Dozan. We have an episode all about him. He
did?
Yeah, with the mafia Yakuza ties. So go back into the archives and listen to the Ballad of Ricky Dozan.
Exactly. And he actually became acquainted with Ricky when he turned up at his apartment when he was a high school student and just knocked on the door and asked, "How do I become a wrestler?"
That's like your dream.
Ricky invited him in and, much to Matsuda's surprise, fed him an enormous amount of fried chicken and encouraged him to begin training.
Not to our surprise, though, since we know all about Ricky Dozan.
No, that's like the most Ricky Dozan thing.
Yeah, that's
ever.
Classic Ricky.
Years later, Matsuda debuted and by all accounts had a fantastic first match. But much to his surprise, when he came back and saw his mentor, he was met by a round of slaps across the head from his senpai, Ricky Dozan, in the locker room.
Okay.
Hurt and confused by the incident, another wrestler took him to one side and explained that Ricky was actually incredibly proud of him, but just didn't know any other way to express himself.
Is that how you're going to wish me happy birthday next week? Just slapping me.
Slap, 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 slap. Like E. Honda in Street Fighter. Eventually, though, he and Ricky Dozan had a disagreement. Ricky Dozan felt that Matsuda should compete for some time as a sumo wrestler or a judoka to gain muscle and credibility, whereas Matsuda just wanted to continue wrestling full time. And with that, Matsuda purchased a one-way ticket to the United States and vowed never to return.
Ooh, dramatic.
At this point in his life, Matsuda wrestled only occasionally when Hogan studied under him, but notably, he did not charge for his services to train at his gym, which he ominously called the Snake Pit.
That's a really cool name. That's a really cool 80s name.
He believed that only 1 in 20 could possibly survive his grueling training regime. His students faced 4 months of daily workouts, including thousands of non-stop push-ups, sit-ups, and squats every day before they even reached the point that they were allowed to get through the ropes.
That reminds me of when Louis Theroux did his little documentary on wrestling and implied that it was fake, and then they made him do things until he puked.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is pretty much the same thing. You'll see where we're going with this in a moment. But basically, this was to weed out the weak from the chaff.
Yeah.
And, Hogan passed the test. He did all of these squats, these sit-ups and push-ups and anything else that was asked of him. But when he was finally allowed through the ropes and began to grapple, he faced a big surprise. Linz, I would like you to read this extract from Hulk Hogan's book.
Oh, yes. I want to read his book now. Okay.
It's not very good.
Oh, nuts.
It's mainly lies, but this bit isn't.
Okay. Before I knew it, Masuda was sitting down between my legs and putting his elbow in the middle of my shin. Then he grabbed the end of my toe and twisted my foot until crack, my shin bone broke in half. The whole thing took about 2 seconds. I was hurt and confused. I didn't know why Matsuda had done that to me. I had a lot to learn. What the hell do you learn from that?
The thing that he had to learn, and that he didn't learn until over 1 year later, was that wrestling is a work. As in, work is lingo, meaning that it is staged. So the wrestlers are cooperating together. I'm deliberately not using the word fake because it isn't fake, but the wrestlers are not legitimately fighting each other. But when Hulk trained, he was under the impression that that was exactly what it was.
So instead of just telling him, they were like, I'll just break his shin.
Well, you have to remember back at this time, so in the late 70s, kayfabe, which we've covered before in our Chris Benoit episode, but just very briefly, that is the fake world of pro wrestling. That is you keep up kayfabe, where you keep up the illusion that wrestling is 100% real, and kayfabe meant a lot more back then than it does today when you see wrestling.
That includes storyline, right?
Yeah, that includes storyline, everything. Basically, you have to treat it as if it's absolutely real. I mean, a great example of kayfabe is Dusty Rhodes, who was blinded on television and proceeded to wear an eye patch for months afterwards, off camera, including to his child's birthday party.
His kid might have thought he was a pirate. Dusty Rhodes the pirate.
As soon as his kids were gone, he's probably, I don't need this anymore, baby.
The name is so corny too. Dusty Rhodes. Okay.
Now, the reason for this is because they need to protect the business. They need to make that not just any musclehead could walk in the door and find out the big secret that wrestling was cooperative and not a legitimate sport. Hogan had turned up as a bass-playing bodybuilder and had paid no dues as an amateur wrestler. And Hogan goes on to explain that he believes that Matsuda broke his leg to make him humble and as a due-paying rite of passage.
He could have ended his career by breaking his leg, though, before it even began.
He very much could have, but I suppose you could consider this the final test. Would Hogan come back to train once his leg had healed? You better believe it, brother. So Hogan came back, he began training, the cast was off his leg, and he started working again. And then, eventually, Hogan began wrestling in Florida, and then in Alabama, and then in Memphis as his original name. Before he was Hulk Hogan, he was Terry Boulder.
That's terrible. He should have been Terry Cloth.
And after a few missteps along the way, he would eventually start to gain traction. And the greatest thing about this is his chest hair that he had in this era, Linz. I'm going to send you a picture, and could you describe it to me?
Certainly, Chris. Oh, Jesus. Now, is this meant to be the letter T?
It's a T for Terry.
Yeah, because it kind of looks like either spiky broccoli or cartoony T. That is disgusting, and I don't know why it's disgusting.
Mm. It also sort of looks like a mushroom cloud with nipples.
Yes. Oh, we've got to put this on the Instagram. That is imagination, 10 points, but execution, not sure. You could have made it more square. It's like hairy boobs with a line. Yeah, I don't like that. No. No.
No, not your cup of tea.
No, not my cup of tea.
Just of note as well is to his left, our right in the picture. That's classy Freddie Bassie as his manager at the time, and he featured in our Ricky Dozan episode as the feared evil foreigner that Ricky Dozan would battle in Japan.
Oh, okay, nice.
It was about this time that he appeared on a radio show, and just as it happened, on the same day, Lou Ferrigno, the actor who played the Incredible Hulk, was also booked on the show. And the radio host commented that at 6'7" and 295 pounds, with 24-inch pythons, dude, that he absolutely dwarfed Ferrigno. And thus the Hulk name was born. Initially as Hulk Boulder, though, because that dumb nickname had to stick around for just a little bit longer. It wasn't until Hulk briefly appeared in the WWF that he added Hogan to his name at the request of Vince McMahon Sr. No, that's not the Vince McMahon you're thinking of, but his father.
Damn, that's just crazy, like how many generations of McMahons have been in that federation.
The name was a request of the McMahons because they have Irish heritage, and Vince McMahon Sr. felt that an Irish superstar would be useful. He also suggested that Hogan might dye his hair red.
No,
exactly, and that's what Hogan thought as well, and Hulk muttered the immortal words that he would repeat so many times throughout his career that day when he said, "That doesn't work for me, brother."
I'm sorry, but Hulk Hogan with a red hair, that is just awful. And it's nothing to do with people with red hair. It's just specifically him with the red hair. That is so wrong. Like the deep tan plus the red hair, that would just look so bizarre.
It's the contrast, the blonde and the deep red of his skin. Hogan's brief run in the WWF as a bad guy at this time only lasted less than a year before he jumped over to work in Japan. And Japan is where he really cut his teeth as Ichiban Hulk Hogan and became a star. He battled Ricky Dozan's student Antonio Inoki regularly, and Hogan became a household name in Japan. He even defeated Antonio Inoki in the finals of a tournament. In his 788 matches for New Japan Pro Wrestling since 1972, Antonio Inoki only lost 47 times. When Inoki put somebody over, it was for a reason. And that reason? Cold hard yen, baby. Hogan and Inoki drew huge houses in Japan and eventually ended up teaming up together as well. And during all of this time, Hogan was jumping back and forth to America and eventually began working for a promoter called Vern Gagne and his AWA, the American Wrestling Association. Now, Gagne was a serious mat wrestler who had been and loved the technical catch-as-catch-can style of wrestling, as it's called, i.e. former amateur wrestlers. Hogan, although far more varied in his repertoire at this time than at the height of his career, was not a former amateur wrestler, but, as we discussed, a former bass player in a local Tampa pub rock band. This would prove to be a sticking point, and Hogan rapidly became the hottest thing in the promotion, which was supercharged when Hogan appeared in Rocky III as the ultimate male and the object of desire, Thunderlips.
I do not remember that. Thunderlips.
He battles Rocky in a charity wrestler versus boxer match, but refuses to go along with the script and decides to prove that wrestlers are tougher than boxers.
Well, it's a step up from Mr. Nanny, or is it?
I don't know. I think it's a step down. It's a classic movie. This elevated Hogan's popularity massively, and when he actually arrived in the AWA, he rapidly became the biggest babyface, or good guy, in the promotion, despite originally being a heel or a bad guy. The Hulkster was shifting merchandise literally in the East and the West, and he was the first wrestler to really tap in to t-shirt sales and merchandising. Hulkamania was on the boil and it was almost ready, but Vern Gagne repeatedly refused to put the title on Hogan. Despite some bait and switches along the way, Vern felt the money was in Hogan chasing the belt, which, to be fair, is most likely true, but the problem was he never let Hogan know this. And Hulk was winning top tournaments and titles in Japan at exactly the same time. Hogan and Vern had a bust-up when Hogan realized that while he was away on his tours in Japan, Gagne had been selling Hulk Hogan t-shirts but keeping 100% of the profits.
Now, honestly, that is fucked up.
Yeah, that is carny as fuck, and that is exactly what you expect out of pro wrestling.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
So it was around this time when, Hulk Hogan was sitting around thinking, stroking his Fu Manchu, when suddenly the phone rang. It was Destiny, and Hogan answered it. It wasn't really Destiny, but I bet he knew a few strippers called that. It was actually...
You're so stupid.
It was actually Vince McMahon Jr. And now this is the Vince McMahon that you are thinking of. Mr. McMahon, the genetic jackhammer himself.
The genetic jackhammer. The pumped up pensioner.
Now, Vince Jr. had bought the company from his father, and he had big plans. Vince Sr. had respected the old territory system, and this is where promoters like Vern Gagne had a specified area of the US, that being Minnesota and the surrounding area for Gagne's AWA, where nobody else would dare run a wrestling show, and in return, Vern wouldn't run shows outside of his region. And this was the same all over the US. But the WWF was about to evolve from a New York regional promotion to take on the whole USA, and indeed, the world.
Hell yeah.
Vince, for everything that you can say about him, had a vision, and he wasn't going to let some handshake agreements between old men get in the way. So Vince offered Hogan a job, a big fat contract, and the WWF Championship.
Finally.
Hogan paused for what I guess would probably be about a millisecond and then said, "Where do I sign up, brother?" Hogan gave his notice by telegram because that's how long ago all of this was.
Jesus Christ, what year is it now?
This was late 1982.
Okay, did they not have like fax machines by then?
Maybe none of these wrestling promoters could afford fax machines.
They probably didn't know about anything because they've just been doing like the kayfabe thing for so long.
So Hogan gave this notice by telegram, but Gagne took it to be a joke by a fellow wrestling promoter and didn't actually believe it. But when Hogan didn't turn up for an advertised show, Gagne's son called him up and asked why he hadn't turned up to the show, and Hogan simply replied that he was being paid more to not be there.
Ooh, I like that. Sassy.
It wasn't just Hogan that left the AWA. At the same time, Jesse Ventura, our favorite conspiracy theorist here on the show, Mean Gene Okerlund, Bobby Heenan, Dr. David Schultz, and several others also left in a mass exodus of the company, and that was indeed just the start. Over the next 2 years, a distinct pattern developed. The AWA would push someone to the moon, and the WWF would poach them away.
Oof.
Eventually, Vern Gagne had to put the belt on his son, just because he could trust him not to jump to another promotion. The AWA trundled along for a few more years, but the day Hogan left was really the day that the fate of the promotion was sealed.
Well, that's kind of sad. And it also kind of, it's apt for Vince McMahon's image.
100%, because the WWF had just found their meal ticket. While the AWA didn't want to base their promotion around Hogan because he knew more baselines than he knew wrestling holds, the WWF wanted something that was a little bit more rock and roll. Hulk Hogan was exactly that man, and he burst onto the scene, and less than a month into his reappearance in the World Wrestling Federation, he found himself across the ring as a last-minute replacement from the WWF World Heavyweight Champion, the evil Iranian, the Iron Sheik.
What?
As he liked to call himself later in life, Sheiky Baby.
What? That's terrible.
Now, the Iron Sheik employed a vicious submission maneuver known as the camel clutch.
No.
Linz, can you describe the camel clutch to the listeners, for anyone who might not be familiar?
Okay. That's... So the victim is laying face down on the ground, but is being pulled up by the perp, who kind of has their hands locked around the neck and chin while they sit on the spine and pull back. Lovely.
Yes.
The camel clutch. I love his shoes too, Chris.
I was hoping you would notice those. Those are actually his evil Iranian shoes.
Yes, I can tell. I was silly.
Now, the fact is, Linz, that nobody had been able to break the camel clutch. And as you can see from that image, Hogan was caught in it. And quite frankly, this was the end. Hulkamania was over before it started. And the evil Iron Sheik would go on to hold the world title hostage. But wait, what's that flowing through Hulk Hogan's veins? It's the red, white, and blue dude. So he managed to break the camel clutch and forced the Sheik to straddle his back like Yoda. And as he stood up, he launched himself backwards into the corner. The Iron Sheik took the impact and went flying into the center of the ring. And Hogan took a moment to center himself before he dropped the atomic leg drop right on the Iron Sheik's neck for the 1, 2, 3.
Yes. I got really excited.
Well, Hulkamania was officially running wild, and the WWF had found their heroic star. But in the next little conspiratorial fact we're going to come across in Hulk's career, very nearly real-life disaster occurred in the match. You see, the Iron Sheik was a real-life Olympic-trained wrestler who had fled Iran in fear for his life. He had also come up through the AWA himself. The night before the match, the phone rang in the Iron Sheik's hotel room. And who was on the other end but our old friend, Vern Gagne? And he had an offer for the Sheik. Hey, Sheik, do me a favor, will you? I'll give you $100,000 if you break Hogan's leg in the match and bring that WWF title over to Minnesota with you.
Oh my God. You're kidding.
Now, Hulk already had a previously broken leg.
Yeah.
It wouldn't necessarily have been the hardest thing for a massive Iranian with muscles bigger than his head to break Hogan's leg again. But fortunately, the Iron Sheik said "Hak Toy" to the offer. He decided not to break Hogan's leg that night and, as he'd like to put it, make the Hulk humble. Now, unfortunately, we lost the Iron Sheik a few weeks ago.
No.
But check out the documentary on him called The Sheik. It's brilliant. He's a very complicated character, and he became an absolute meme generation machine in the last few years of his life.
I know what I'm doing tonight.
Read his Twitter. You won't regret it.
Okay.
However, Hulkamania did continue that night, and it began to sweep America, and mania is the word for it. Hogan's distinctive look became etched into pop culture, and he rode a cultural zeitgeist to superstardom. His red and yellow gear, his Fu Manchu mustache, his 24-inch pythons, as he referred to his arms, the entrance music, the big leg drop, saying the word brother at the rate of a Gatling gun, and, as famously put by It's Always Sunny, blonde Chinese hair and the skin of a hot dog. These are all iconic features which come together to form the entity that we know as Hulk Hogan, brother.
The entity. Did you try to make it DSR?
Oh, just remember, as we get into this later on, when we go further along this, and spoiler, folks, this is going to be a two-parter that we have today, that at a certain point, Terry Bollea and Hulk Hogan become two very different entities, even with completely different body parts. Anyway, the WWF was rocketed to being the biggest game in town, and as such, it decided that Hulk and his new rock and wrestling revolution was going to headline a show that Vince thought up, a little thing you might have heard of called WrestleMania. WrestleMania was said to be the biggest wrestling show at the time on a scale like nobody had ever seen before, and the WWF went on a major media blitz, but Hogan caused some major controversy just days before the inaugural show, when Hogan and Mr. T appeared on the Richard Belzer hosted show Hot Properties to promote WrestleMania. Belzer was an actor and a comedian who repeatedly requested during the interview that Hogan put him in a wrestling hold, being rather dismissive towards pro wrestling in general. Hogan eventually gave in and put Belzer in a front face lock and cinched it in tight.
Oh, geez.
Linz, let's watch.
Oh, yes.
Now, the first thing you need to know about amateur wrestling or professional wrestling or submission holds, you just tell me, brother, when you want him to quit squealing, okay?
All right.
It's called a front chin lock. How about it, T?
Keep him like that for a little while. Because he's all right. He's just sleeping. He's sleeping. Really, I was a sleeper hole. He'll be all right. He's waking up now. That was a serious
All right,
move. A
brother?
lot of people.
See? It works. All right, brother.
And now, we'll be right back after this word from you-know-who. We'll be right back.
So we had a little, you said he was a comedian, right? Richard Belzer?
Richard Belzer, yes.
Yeah, so he's a little wiry guy in a drab grey suit, and I think he might have been, mocking wrestling beforehand, saying that it's not real, and the general response you get. So you get Hulk Hogan going, "Oh, I'll put him in a chin lock." It's like, "Yeah, put me in a chin lock." He does, and the guy just drops like a rag doll.
Well, first he puts his hands out.
Oh yeah, he puts his hands out and does a little sort of a jazz hand, sort of like, "Oh yeah," and then he drops like a rag doll. And then Mr. T's like, "He's just sleeping." It's actually an amazing clip.
Did you notice when he jumps up at the end, like the Energizer
like-
Bunny?
And now we're going back to what was it? Going to the adverts or something. It's just like, what the fuck? Yeah. But then apparently he said that he was in shock and he didn't really know where he was and what he was saying after that. But that was so strange. He drops like a rag doll. He gets lightly slapped by Hulk Hogan.
He's
And then he
snoring.
just springs up and he starts like presenting. It's really bizarre.
But when he turns his back to the camera, did you notice the blood pouring out of the back of his head?
Yeah. And then in the
All
next
over the
clip-
back of his shitty sports coat.
Yeah, and in the next clip he has like stitches. So Jesus Christ.
This was later settled as a large lawsuit, I do believe, where both Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan were sued by Richard Belzer, and I think it was settled roughly to the tune of around $500,000.
Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, he shouldn't have done it. And we know now that you never, put your hands on another person. Not that you didn't know back then, but yeah, this is for how it wasn't particularly violent. He was like,
No.
"Oh, put me in a chin lock," and it wasn't particularly violent. It was very fast, and he just dropped. And yeah, that's. I mean, it would be handy to know how to do that to somebody if they attacked you. But I don't, not like on a regular basis at like the co-op or something. Just like put the cashiers in a chin lock and leave.
Again, this is another instance of wrestlers having to defend kayfabe and defend the world that they're in. There used to be a rule, pretty much, if somebody challenges you that wrestling is fake, then you need to hit them as hard as you possibly can to make them believe it's real.
Oh my gosh. I mean, like, I don't know why people say that. Like, I suppose that if you don't know about it, you would just assume that the kayfabe thing wasn't that serious, but it really is that serious. That kind of makes me think that, like, you know, if you do, like, if you slap your way from the dive bar to the ring, from the base to the slapping men on chests, like, and then you're doing kayfabe for so long, I wonder if psychologically you just get used to, like, not lying, but like fabricating a story to the point where you just can't stop lying about shit.
I mean, quite possibly. I mean, it's imagine like, any movie star, Tom Cruise, when he packs up for the day, he's got it. It's like method acting back in the day. You had to stay in character the entire time.
Russell Crowe is probably a better example because we all know he did some messed up method acting for like Romper Stomper and movies like that. So yeah, I don't know psychologically how that works. And I guess it is a form of acting, but I don't know how far you can take it before you stop knowing that you should probably stop. But yeah, I mean, psychologically, I don't know what goes on there, but there must be something to it. I mean, because Hulk Hogan, it's something he would say, like, "Oh, I was once going to play in Metallica and blah blah blah." I feel like that's a Hulk Hogan thing, but it's not a Terry thing. So does the line just get blurred?
Yeah. Well, I'm not actually sure if the world has ever seen Terry Bollea.
That's what I mean. It's like, is Terry gone? Is he gone now?
He's more Hulkamania than man now.
Bronzed and bleached.
Well, despite this incident on the Richard Belzer show, WrestleMania 1 was a huge success, thanks in large part to Hogan and Mr. T teaming up to face Cowboy Bob Orton and Rowdy Roddy Piper in a tag team extravaganza. Other celebrities were also involved, such as Liberace and Cyndi Lauper, as the WWF's partnership with the newly launched MTV was the key to taking the WWF to global superstardom.
Cyndi Lauper?
Mm-hmm.
Was she on the mat?
She didn't wrestle, but she accompanied, I believe it was Wendy Richter, to the ring for her match against, I think it was the Fabulous Moolah, I believe.
This is amazing. They don't make it like they used to, do they? I mean, I guess now you've got Bad Bunny and what's his name?
Logan Paul.
Logan Paul in the ring, but I suppose they do make it like they used to, don't they?
Yeah. Well, if there was ever anyone, made for cutting a pro wrestling interview, it's Cyndi Lauper. She did a cracking job in the lead up to that. The WWF over the next couple of years went from strength to strength, with a particular highlight being WrestleMania 3, where Hogan faced his one-time friend, Andre the Giant, and he picked up that big, stinky giant dude and slammed all 9,000 pounds of him into the mat, and the impact caused a fault of the earth to crack open, and several small island nations were swallowed up by Atlantis, dude. If you believe Hogan, that is. But Hogan...
That's that what they called you, the big sticky dude.
The big stinky dude. Hogan would remain the flagship superstar of the WWF for years to come, and his performance was, in hindsight, somewhat repetitive. Hogan would face a big, unstoppable monster wrestler, big boot, drop the big leg drop on him, hot dog and grandstand in the ring, and rinse, wash, repeat. The crowds lapped it up in the 80s, and Hulkamania was living in the hearts of every child in America. Eventually, though, by WrestleMania 6, fans were getting bored of this and clamoring for something new. Previous rising stars like the Macho Man Randy Savage had been smothered by Hogan, who had hitched his wagon to the Macho Man and formed a tag team with him called the Mega Powers. This time, though, Vince McMahon had a new toy in the form of the Ultimate Warrior. Linz, can you briefly describe your memory of the Ultimate Warrior?
The Ultimate Warrior. Of course, he was all bronze. I think he had long brown hair. Was it curly?
He did, and yes, it was.
And he wore kind of like leathery flares and all sorts of colours.
He wore face paint, a very muscly dude, more muscles than is possibly physically possible. He wore face paint and tiny little pants and a lot of tassels.
Yes, he had tassels all over the place.
Now, Hogan would go on to lose his match with Warrior at WrestleMania 6, although he did still try to steal the spotlight after the show by proceeding to go and pick up the World Wrestling Federation title, hand it to Warrior, pose with him as the show closed, making sure that he didn't get 1 second of camera time just to himself, because
Oh my God, that is too much.
that's how you stay
Seriously.
over, brother.
He Kanye'd him.
Hogan sat back at home and watched while he crafted another storyline with a wrestler called Earthquake upon his return. But he was also looking at the ticket sales during Warrior's title reign, and they were way down on Hogan's previous figures.
Aw.
So, after a couple of months off, he bent the ear of Vince McMahon and whispered seductively, "Vince, dude, you gotta put the strap back on the Hulkster, brother." And
Mustache tickling Vince's ear.
that's a great idea, Terry. And then the Warrior lost the title in the run-up to WrestleMania 7 to Sergeant Slaughter, a former US Marine who had become an Iraqi sympathizer under the influence of our old friend, the Iron Sheik. Hogan beat Slaughter and regained the World Heavyweight Championship, whereas the Ultimate Warrior would never get anywhere near the belt ever again. Something big was rumbling in the background. Something at a federal level. The
Okay.
FBI had trained their eyes on the WWF. They were rapidly putting a case together accusing Vince McMahon of essentially being a drug dealer,
What?
providing steroids to the wrestlers
Ah.
in his company.
Uh-huh.
Vince
Okay.
needed to win some quick public support, and Hogan and his rippling muscles conveniently had some Oscar-winning movies to shoot. The WWF title was quickly shifted to a smaller cast of characters such as Ric Flair, Randy Savage, Bret the Hitman Hart, and Yokozuna, the latter of which would very rarely be described as small, but certainly wasn't muscular in the same vein of Hogan.
Hmm.
Upon Hogan's return to the WWF, he was noticeably slimmer, but did win the
Shit.
title again. But he wasn't long for the company under the new post-steroid era, and he eventually left the WWF for good in 1993, after which he made a few more movies and wrestled a little bit in Japan again. The WWF had previously vanquished all of its rivals, like the AWA, but one had continued to grow to the point of being a solid number 2, WCW, World Championship Wrestling. Now earned by media mogul Ted Turner, WCW had deep pockets. Like Titanic deep pockets. Pockets
Oof.
deep enough to... Shut up. To afford...
Like, Chris, did you have to?
Pockets deep enough to afford one Hulk Hogan. WCW, headed up by Eric Bischoff, had a multi-million-dollar deal awaiting for Hogan, who liked the sound of that kind of money. So for the first time since the AWA, Hulk Hogan was going to be wrestling for another North American promotion. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. Just months into his WCW tenure, Hulk Hogan was called to the stand to testify against his former employer and friend, Vince McMahon. But what would
God.
Hulk Hogan do? Would he support the WWF Would he use this chance to bury Vince in the competition, or would he tell the truth?
His truth or the truth?
Find out next time on part 2.
Oh, man!
Fall of Hulkamania.
Man, I was getting so into that. And I was also thinking, right, if the WWF was investigated for steroids,
Mhm.
didn't they look towards WCW and see, like, what was his name? Scott Steiner.
They did. I mean, he wasn't quite that big at that time. He was muscly, but yeah, not quite the genetic freak that he would become.
Yeah,
But
because I've
yeah.
never seen anything that insane since him.
No, I mean Scott Steiner is artificially created in a lab. I do believe
It's
he's
seriously
insane.
crazy. Like, is he still around today?
He is. He manages a Shoney's fast food restaurant somewhere in America. So that concludes this episode. This is very much a setup episode for part 2. Watch out for that one coming very soon. But this is the rise of Hulk Hogan. He's very much been on an upward trajectory, although there have been some controversies along the way. He's really hit the peak of his career, although he has yet to go on to hit the peak of his career monetarily. We will see that in a few ways in the next episode. But this is going to be the story of a man who is at the very top of the cultural zeitgeist. He's going to fall a bit more, and then he's going to hit rock bottom, dude.
And land on a pile of lies.
Would you believe it? Land on a pile of lies and money.
Hell yeah. I can't wait. I love these episodes about wrestling. It's been a long time since we did a wrestling one, and I did request it.
We've had several requests come at us. We've had a few listeners actually get in touch and say that they didn't actually care anything about pro wrestling, but they've since got into it since listening to our episode. So actually, that's a really big compliment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you've made Chris's
Yeah, the world of pro wrestling is realer than you think, and a lot of the time, the backstage drama is almost more interesting than what's going on in front of the camera, including court cases, as we're going to get into next time. But for the time being, to all my little Hulkamaniacs out there, just want to say, remember to say your prayers and take your vitamins, and remember, what you gonna do when Hulkamania and Dystopian Simulation Radio run wild on you?
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.
Bye.